Welcome back. So let's take a look at creating the wrapping here for our spear and the ones up here, as well as this mesh weaving that we have towards the tip of the spear. So before we get started, we do need an extra tool to allow us to get this look a bit more easier. So we're going to be using a plugin called Tyflow. So you can download this for free on the Tyflow website. Just download this, you'll get a folder full of different versions. Just make sure you copy and paste the right plugin version that's the same version as your 3ds Max that you're using. So when you find the version that you're looking for and you've downloaded everything, just navigate to this folder structure. So your PC, your C drive, program files, Autodesk, Max23, and plugins. You'll see that I'm using Tyflow_2023. So just copy and paste that file into here and just restart your Macs. Okay, let's get started. So to start off, let's create a helix shape to assist with this wrapping here. So let's go to our Create tab and let's go to Shapes, and you'll see over here we have helix. So let's just create that. Doesn't quite matter how many turns you have. I'll just zero this out. Well, let's make it 1, which is more default here. And the radius and radius 2, we'll work that out later. So let's just right click to cancel that tool, and let's scale that and move that into place. So making sure we have our rotate snaps turned on, which is up here, or A on the keyboard. Let's just rotate that 90 degrees, and let's move that back in the Y direction. So I'm just going to go down to our transform boxes down at the bottom here and just right click these little spinners. Great. So let's move this back, and to get the length and the right amount of turns, I'm going to go into my front view to help with that. So let's press F3 on the keyboard to go into our wireframe mode, and let's go into our Modify tab, and in the helix parameters, let's increase the height so it's roughly the same length. So about 38 seems correct. And then let's count the turns here on the handle so we can punch in the right turns here in our parameters. So it looks like there's 2 weavings here, or braidings. So it goes down once, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So let's put in 8 turns. And then let's reposition this and let's scale the radius down so it roughly fits, and the radius 2 as well. So you should have something like this. Now what we're going to do here is use one of the new modifiers that we just installed. So let's go to our modifier tab. Let's go to the modifier list, and let's scroll all the way to the bottom, and you should see a new set of modifiers here, starting with tie, and we're going to use the tie conform modifier. Now this will conform any object to another object surface. So let's click that, and over here we can pick an object we want this shape to conform to. So let's pick this handle, and that should snap right into place. Now yours might not look a bit like mine, and that's because in the handle I've just added an open subdiv with an iteration of 4. Now if I turn that off, you can see that the helix isn't conforming to the surface as nicely as you would expect. And this is just because the handle is too low in polygon for that conform to look as nicely as we want it to. So just to assist with this process, I've added an open subdiv and added 4 iterations just so we can have a nice smooth conform operation on this handle here. So let's go back to our helix. So what we're going to do next is apply a sweep modifier. So let's go to our modifier list, scroll all the way down, and we're looking for sweep. So by default it's going to use one of these inbuilt sweep defaults. Now none of these serve our purpose, so let's just use a custom section. So I've gone ahead and created a line here. You can just do that by going into the Create tab, Lines and Shapes, and just clicking in the open space, holding down Shift to lock that selection to a straight line, and just clicking again. Right click to cancel that creation of that shape, and again to cancel the tool, and that's what we have. So roughly about this length will be fine. You can adjust it later. So let's go back to our helix and our sweep modifier, and let's pick that line that we made. Great. So by default yours might not look like this, so it's probably looking a bit more like this. So in the sweep parameters, we want to make sure banking is turned off and our angle is set correctly. So we're looking at about -90 degrees. So I'm just going to punch in -90. And this is what we have. So nice wrapped braiding around this handle. So we're not quite done yet. We need to give it its shape here. So on top of this sweep, let's add a shell modifier. And what a shell does is gives more thickness to certain shapes. So I don't want any inner amount, and I just want an outer amount here. I'm going to reduce this down to about 0.8. That looks pretty good. And I think for now we're sort of done with this. So just going back to the front view, we can see that the sweep isn't quite aligned to our reference image, and we can fix that up a little bit later. First, what I want to do is get the other line in that's going in the other direction. So we can just copy this current sweep. So let's just right click and clone, and we want a copy of this. So you can see that we have this nice clone here. And what's cool about this is that the type conform and sweep and shell is reacting to the surface in real time. So all we have to do is mirror this and line it back up. So let's go to our toolbar at the top here where it says mirror. Click that, looking for mirror axis in the X. So let's press OK to that. And that looks like the right direction. And let's just move that into place roughly. Great, so this is what we get. It's looking pretty good, but it's not quite ready yet. Let's just make sure that we get all these other lines in and these areas here before we make further edits to this shape to make it look the way it should. Because right now it's sort of intersecting each other and it's too high poly as well. So we need to reduce the polygon count. Okay, so let's bring this up. So I'm just going to hold down Shift and move this across. This will create a clone of this object. You can see that it conforms to this shape still, which is great. And what I want to do is move this into place. I think I do want to start off with the other side first, so I'm just going to mirror this across the X again. Something like that. So let's go to the front view just to see if it's in the right position. Oops. Great. And I'm just going to resize this to make sure it only goes to about here. So I'm going to go back into my helix in my modifier stack, and I'm just going to reduce the turn count down, as well as the height. You can see that all updating as we do this, which is great. Let's go to the front view and let's just make sure that we have the right count number, which seems to be about maybe 2. That looks good. And just like what we did down here, we're going to do the same up here. So let's right click, clone, and we want to copy. And then let's go up to the toolbar here where it says mirror. Let's mirror that in the X. Let's just move that into place. Great. If this is not the correct amount, we can always go back into our helix here and increase the turn amount, which I think I might do to make that look a bit nicer. So maybe 3 might be the way to go. So let's go to the other one as well. Go down to helix and let's put in 3. Great, so this is looking pretty good. Now let's get the shape looking more like we have here in the reference image. And let's make sure that it's not as high poly as it is right now. So to do this, we're going to use the retopology tools inside 3ds Max. So let's click this first helix. And what I want to do is add an edit poly on top of my shell. Great. This sort of, in a way, bakes down everything that we've done earlier. And I want to then reduce the polygon count. So let's go to our modifier list and let's scroll down towards the bottom to add a retopology modifier. Over here. And what this does is it gives us a really nice result on some nice simple shapes like this. It saves us from manually retopologizing this shape. So let's see. I'm going to go into my target size counter, and let's add 100. And let's see what results that gives me. So let's press compute. Not quite what I was looking for. Let's see. Great. All right, so I'm going to reset that. And let's try a different method here. So I'm going to delete my retopology modifier. I'm going to delete my edit poly. And I'm going to delete my shell. Let's right click from here and convert this shape to an editable poly. This will bake everything down. And then let's add our retopology modifier. Let's try that again. So let's add 100 and let's compute. Great. So the results here look pretty good. Just checking the mesh here to see if there's anything that we're not quite liking. So I'm going into and out of isolation mode by pressing Alt P on the keyboard, or just this little button here down at the bottom center. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. And now what I want to do is let's add a shell modifier to get that thickness back. And let's add a little bit more here. Great, that's looking pretty good. Now let's just do the same to the other side. So I'm going to click this helix here. I'm going to right click, convert to editable poly. Whoops. Before I do that, I'm just going to delete this shell. Right click, convert to editable poly. And I'm going to add my retopology modifier. Put in a face count of about 100 and compute. Let's check that. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And then let's add our shell modifier. So I'm just going to go into the one that we did earlier to check the outer amount, which is 32. I can also just copy this modifier here just by right clicking, pressing copy, then going to the other shape here, right clicking the topmost modifier and pressing paste. And this should give us the same results. Great, so that's looking pretty good. Now all we've got to do at this point here is just make sure that it's intersecting correctly. So with this shape here selected, let's add an edit poly and let's adjust this shape so it's reacting appropriately to the other braiding here. So let's go into our edge selection. And what I'm going to do here is double click this top line, whichever one's closer. So I think this one here would do. Then I want to pull this up, but I want to use a soft selection, so the other areas over here pull up along with it. So let's go into our edit poly and go to soft select, enable that. You can see that we have this sort of gradient along our mesh. So I'm just going to reduce the fall off. And what I want to do as well is allow edge distance. This will try its best to make sure that the fall off happens along the surface rather than around a radius. So for example, if I turn this off, you can see that the soft select is affecting this area here, which is not what we want. I want to turn that on, increase the distance, and it's doing its best to sort of follow the shape of the surface here. Okay, so with a fall off of about 4.2, let's see what that looks like. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that, though I think I do want to use my vertex selection and individually grab vertices that need adjusting. So let's grab this one here. It's just the one that's behind. Let's just make sure we grab the correct one. And let's just move that up. And adjust any other ones that need adjusting. Now I'm going to go in and out of wireframe mode to assist with this. And rotate around my model quite often to make sure that I've got the right selection made. So this top, this one that we're doing now, we're going to make sure that the braiding is sitting on top of the other one as well, the whole way through. So I'm going to grab these ones here, making sure I'm grabbing the right ones. And I'm just going to pull that up some and make any sort of adjustments here. Just going to work my way around. We're almost done here. One last one. Great, so that's looking pretty good. Just going to change the color of this to a grey color. And looks like this area needs a little bit of adjusting. Okay. And the other shape, we're going to do a very similar thing, except we're going to just adjust the bottom side here. So let's enable our soft select, our edge distance, and our fall off, which was 4.2. And let's take a look at our edge distance here. So let's increase that. So let's do something like 7 will be fine. And then, much like the other side, let's just do the same thing. Except on the bottom side, we're going to make sure that the bottom side is sitting on top of the other braiding here. Just going to make sure that you're not moving anything that we're not supposed to. So just make sure you're going in and out of wireframe mode by pressing F3, so you can see what you're selecting. Okay, and we're done there. Great, let's take a look at our work. I think that's looking pretty good. So we can adjust this a little bit further if we wanted to. Try to sort of scale in a little bit if we want, or just make finer adjustments with our edit poly just by moving these points in and out. I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. Though we can also go into our shell modifier and make any further adjustments if we wanted to. Right. So I'm going to leave it like that. Now that's pretty much done. We just got to connect these two ends together. If we wanted to, we can add a line here to sort of hold that shape a bit nicer, which is what I'll do. So I will connect these two together first. So let's highlight one of these shapes, and then let's go to our edit poly, and under edit geometry you have attach. So let's click that button, and then let's select the other side. Great. And then in the areas where they need to connect, all we need to do is just bridge that side over, or just weld them over. So right click to cancel your attach tool, and press 4 on the keyboard to enter polygon selection mode. I'm going to turn off soft select, and I'm going to highlight this side as well, and just press delete on the keyboard. Now all I'm going to do is just target weld these together, or just use the weld tool. So let's press 1 on the keyboard to go into vertex selection mode. I'm going to grab this one, and pressing F3, I'm going to grab this one here as well. Right click, weld, let's use the settings here, and let's increase the threshold till they snap together. So let's press apply, and then let's grab the other two, which is this one here and this one. Let's press apply, and this one should be easier. Let's grab that and that, increase the threshold. Let's press apply, and let's do the last one as well. Great. So press OK for that last one. And then we can make any sort of adjustments here to make that fit a little nicer. Just going to move this one back a little bit. Great, so let's do the same for the other side, or the other end here. So let's go into our polygon selection mode. Let's delete these two polygons. Then let's just weld the appropriate vertices. And make any sort of adjustments that you need to fix this shape up a little bit. Great, so we're done with that. Just to hold the line, let's fix this first. So I'm going to grab this, just push that back a little bit. So we might need to do a little bit here as well. So just to hold this shape a little bit better, I'm just going to add a swift loop along the center here. So since it's all connected up, it should just apply to the whole object. So let's press Alt 1 on the keyboard and just apply a swift loop. Let's press roughly around the middle here. And that should be fine. Great. Okay, so this section here is roughly the same as this. You're just doing it to a smaller section. So what I'm going to do is sort of skip that area and move on to this weaving and getting that fitting correctly. So to get this weaving, there's a few extra steps, or a few steps that we need to take. So let's just create one of these weaves first, and let's create that weave shape, and then we can sort of wrap it around this area here. So let's go to our Modify tab. Let's go to the Geometry button, and I'm going to create a plane roughly in this shape here, making sure I have no length and width segments, and you can always adjust the shape a little bit later, but I'm pretty happy with that so far. So let's go to our Edit Poly tab, or our Modify tab, sorry, and add an Edit Poly. Let's add 2, and then what I'm going to do is just grab these edges here, right click, go to Connect Options, and let's choose how many segments we want here. So the amount of segments will roughly be the amount of individual weaves you see here. So it's hard to tell how many is here, but there's roughly, I would say, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe about 10 going all the way around, maybe a little bit more. But let's just work with 10 here. So I'm going to increase the segment count to 10 and press OK. And what we're going to do here is then grab every second line like that, and then move that down to create that sort of a look. Now I think this might be a little too thick, so I might go back into object mode and just scale that down a little bit. Okay, so on top of this edit poly, let's add an open subdiv. And if we take ISO lines displays off, this is what this shape looks like. And let's use this as our first weave, and let's get that weaving pattern going. So I'm going to adjust my gizmo here, our pivot point, to assist with this. So this point here will be the center point. So I want to make sure that I use my snap toggles here. So I can open this up just by right clicking this button here, and we can adjust the options. So I don't want it snapped to anything but another vertex. And to make this easier, I'm going to go to the options tab and make sure that enable axis constraints is turned on. By default, it is turned off. So with this turned on, our snaps, and I'm going to press W on the keyboard to go into our move tool. Let's go to the hierarchy tab in the command panel. Let's press effect pivot only. And let's move the gizmo to this center point here. Now, I'm only going to grab the X handle here. This will constrain the handle to this axis, which allows me to still snap to this point here, but overall it hasn't changed its position in the Y or the Z, which is what we want. So I'm going to turn this off, and what I want to do is go to my rotate tool here, making sure that angle snaps is turned on. I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees in the Z value, or -90. And in this case here, I want to have an instance. This will allow me to make adjustments to just one of these objects, and that adjustment will affect the other ones as well. Okay, now the weaving isn't quite in the spot that we need it in, so it's actually this one here. I'm just going to change the colors to make it a little bit easier to see. Great, so I'm going to move this over to this point. So this is the correct position for this weaving. And then I'm going to copy this across 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So let's hold down shift and move that over in the X to this point here. And then I want 3 copies. Whoops, did say 4, didn't I? 4 copies, just like that. And then what we want to do is we want to grab this guy again. Well, let's grab this original one. Let's copy him across 1, 2, 3, 4 times, making sure I'm snapping to that point there. So this is the center point that we need this to be snapped to. So let's hold down shift, move that down in the Y, and I'm moving my cursor over that point. And because I have access constraints on, it's behaving the way I want it to. Great. So we do need one more actually. So one more on the end. So I am going to copy that 5 times. Just like that. And I do want one right over here as well. So we have 5, just like that. Then we got to fill in this centerpieces here. So let's grab this first one. Let's hold down Shift, bring that across and snap that to a center point. Then let's just press OK. Then let's move that back so it's in the correct position. Now what we can do is just copy that across 4 times. And I do want this last one here, I think. Let's see. So let's hide that for now. No, we do have one here, so I don't need that. Okay, so there's one more to go, which is this one here. So let's grab this segment and let's press Shift and move that across in the X. Snap that to the center point. We want an instance. And then let's move that down so it's in the correct position. Like that. And then I'm going to instance the rest over. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the end. Great. So now all we have to do is make adjustments to one of these and they will all update at the same time. So I'm just going to highlight everything here. Deselect the bits that we don't need and go into isolation mode by pressing Alt Q. I'm going to grab one of these guys and go to the Modify tab and let's add a shell modifier. You can see they all update. And right click to set them both to 0. And I think I want the inner amount here. Let's see. Doesn't quite matter actually. So let's reduce the thickness of the outer amount. So let's bring that all the way down. Maybe 0.2, and what I can do is go back to this edit poly and overall reduce the thickness of this just like that. Go back to the open subdiv, turn ISO lines display on. Looks like that's not updating for us. That's okay. Use the cage here and we can grab every second line here, just making sure that soft select is turned off. Sometimes there's a visual bug that can happen where it looks like soft select is turned on but it's not. I'm grabbing every second group of vertices here and I'm just pulling this up, making sure snap is turned off just so I can get the right look. Great. Now we've got our weaving, so it looks great. So what we want to do here is make sure that it wraps around the object correctly. Okay, so we need to be able to move this whole thing at once. That can be a little bit tricky, but it can be done. So I think I don't need this last one. I'm just looking at it now. Yeah, I don't need that, so I'm just going to delete that. And what I'm going to do is first group all of these individual objects together. So let's highlight all of these objects, deselect bits that we don't need. And in the menu bar along the top here, under edit, sorry, not edit, group, I want to group this together. And you can give this a name if you want. Okay. And in the top view, what I want to do is create a plane roughly around this shape. So let's go to Create tab, Geometry, and let's create a plane roughly around this size. So about 30, I think, is what we want. And I'm going to right click these little spinners here to center everything. Same thing with the grouped object. This will make sure that these two objects sit right on top of each other. Now in this plane here, we need something quite high poly. This will allow us to bend and rotate and twist this thing so it moves correctly. We're going to be using this plane here as a helper tool to rotate this object here and to bend it. So let's use a length and width segment of 64. I think that's quite dense enough. And then in our weave, what we want to do here is link that to this plane. So to do that, we can go to our Modify tab, scroll to where it says Skin, and we want to use the Skin Wrap modifier. Now this tool here, or this modifier, is great for transferring skin weights across characters, but is used a lot for skinning clothes onto a character as well. And a lot of times it can be used for this purpose. So it's quite a multi-faceted modifier. So we're going to click the skin wrap and add an object. So let's press add, and that object is going to be this plane. You might have to give it some time to think. Okay. And now you'll see that if we move this plane around, that object will move along with it. And what's good about this is that we can manipulate this plane here, that's high poly, and this will follow along with it. So let's bring this over to the front, and what I want to do is apply a bend modifier to the plane. So let's go to the Modifier tab, let's find Bend, and let's increase the angles and direction, and let's make sure that we have the correct axis, which it looks like it's the Y. Okay, so the direction will be 90, and the angle will be, let's take a look at the bottom, it will be close to 360. Just want to make sure these are lining up as best as close as possible. A little bit over 360 it will be, so about there, I think. Okay, so 385 is what I have. You can always adjust that a little bit later. And now what I want to do is make sure this pivot point is in the center of this object, not at the top here. So let's go to our Hierarchy tab, Effect Pivot Only, center to object, and let's turn that off. Let's put that into place roughly about there, and then let's add an FFD modifier to this plane. So let's go to our modifier list and let's add an FFD 4. Let's open up the drop down box here and go to control points. And now in our front view, what we can do is just grab this orange cage and scale this down to fit the reference image. Okay, you might need to go into your perspective view as well. See how that is fitting. And we want to make sure we get a nice fit. Now to make this a little easier to look at, what we can do here with this plane is right click, go to Object Properties, and then we can display this as a box. Now there's benefits and downsides to this. So with display as a box, we don't see the polygons, so it makes it a little bit easier to see, but at the same time we don't see the control points. Now they are still there, so you just got to keep that in mind. So if you kind of know where you're highlighting, you can select the right control points, but you can also quite easily select the wrong one, so just keep that in mind. Right, something like that. Now on top of this FFD, let's add a twist modifier to get this twist effect here. And let's move these angles so we can see where we're twisting at. So we want it on the X. Right, I think what I want to do is delete this FFD and add that on top of the twist so we can get a nicer effect. So let's add that FFD4 again. Let's open up the drop down here, go to control points, and let's reshape that. So now that we've got our twist in, we can have a nicer control on how that sort of tapering looks if we have the FFD on top. Otherwise the FFD itself will be twisted. So that's why we're changing it up a little bit. Right, so in your perspective view, just make sure that it's scaled on the Y direction so it's fitting correctly and nothing is protruding out of these other objects here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Let's sort of do some last minute checks here. And okay, I think that's looking pretty good. Now to get this looking more like this shape here, we can just come back into our object. We need to right click and convert to an editable poly or add an edit poly on top. And then we can just delete areas that we don't want. So I can go to convert to editable poly, and this will allow me to go to my to add an edit poly on top. And what I can do is sort of delete areas that I don't want. So if I want to get a look that's more closely aligned with this, I can come in and grow my selection and chip away at this shape here. So I can highlight this area here, press Control up arrow to delete certain sections to just change up how this is sort of looking. Now I think I might want to delete this whole section here. Let's give this a little bit of asymmetry. So we can use our soft select and maybe not that high of a fall off. You can rotate this to give it a more authentic look to it. Grab some of these other guys. Okay. And we can play around with this as far and as long as we want. You can experiment with your different modifiers as well. For example, the noise might give you a more authentic sort of natural look to this. So I want to use fractal here. And let's increase this slightly. Increase the roughness. Just to move this around. Right. Might need to scale this in a little bit. Okay, so we're pretty much done here. So you got these two bands that can be achieved by doing a very similar approach to how we did these guys here. And what you want to do is use this helper object that we did that we made earlier. That was this plane as a as your tie conform object select. So you'll pick this object instead of this object, and that's how you can get that look. So what I'm going to do here is we are pretty much done with the tutorial. I think it's looking really nice. What I want to do is spend some time getting this looking correct, getting these bands in, and further adjusting this weaving so it's looking as nice as it can be. But I hope you liked the tutorial. I'll see you in the next one.